Just because? A bit boring, if it were only that. The woman's a menace, a threat to Western values. Terrifying to think of her being a social worker. All that awful knowing best stuff, being quite sure what's good for people and not standing any nonsense and making them knuckle under and going round saying how she fully appreciates the seriousness and importance of her job, as if that made it all right. They bloody well ought to come and ask me before they let anybody be a social worker. Then there wouldn't be any. You can take these plates in. She'll be here any minute. It was all most interesting, and in a way that things that happened to me hardly ever were. Mayor Webster, who knew us because her husband was a senior colleague of mine on the staff of the Aberdasey Central Public Library, had brought off what must have seemed to her a smart double coup by providing, as the twice-a-week domestic help we craved, one of the fallen women with whom her municipal duties brought her into contact. It had turned out that the woman in question wasn't really fallen, just rather inadmissibly inclined from the perpendicular. She'd had an illegitimate child or two, and had recently or some time ago neglected or abandoned it or them. Mare had a gift of unmemorability normally reserved for far less emphatic characters, but that was all over now, and the girl was taking proper care of her young, encouraged by her newly acquired husband, a Norwegian merchant seaman, and a pretty good type according to Mare, who went on about it as if she'd masterminded the whole thing. Perhaps she had. Anyway, meeting Betty Arnulfsson was bound to be edifying, however imperfectly fallen she might be. In the sitting-room, which doubled as dining-room and lunching-room when people like Mare were about, a smallish dark girl of 19 or 20 was rearranging rugs and pushing chairs back into position. At my entry, the child I'd seen earlier tottered behind the tall box-like couch, where another of the same size was already lurking. Of this supplementary child I could make out nothing for certain, apart from a frizzy but sparse head of ginger hair. The girl had looked up at me, and then quickly and shyly away again. "Good morning," I said, in the sort of tone officials visiting things are fond of and good at. I seemed not to have chosen this tone. It wasn't my day for tones. "Morning, Mr. Lewis," she muttered, going on with her work. "Miserable old weather." This notification, although accurate enough as far as it went, drew no reply. I fussed round the gate-leg table for a bit, fiddling with plates and cutlery and stealthily watching Betty Arnulfsson. Her straight black hair was ribboned in place by what looked like the belt of an old floral patterned dress. In her plain skirt and jumper, and with her meek expression, she had the air of an underpaid shop-girl or bullied supply teacher. She wore no makeup. Altogether, she wasn't my idea of a delinquent, but then few people are my idea of anything. There was a ring at the front doorbell, a favourite barking trigger of the dog that lived downstairs. On my wife's orders, I went and let in Mayor Webster, whose speed of the verbal mark proved to be at its famed best. By the time we reached the kitchen, I already had a sound general grasp of the events of her morning. These included a bawling out of the assistant child care officer down at the town hall, and a longer, fiercer, more categorical bawling out of the foster mother of one of her babies. "Is Betty here?" she added, without pause. "Hello, Jean, dear. Sorry I'm late. Been dreadfully pushed this morning. Everybody screaming for help. How's Betty getting on? Where is she? I just want to have a word with her a minute." I was close enough behind Mare to see the children returning to defensive positions behind the couch, and Betty looking harried. It was my first view of her in full face, and I thought her quite pretty, but pale and washed out. I also noticed that the ginger-haired child was sucking a dummy similar to that of its fellow. "Ah, good morning, Betty," Mare said bluffly. "How are you getting on? Do you like working for Mrs. Lewis?" "Oh, all right." Mare's lion-like face took on the aspect of the king of beasts trying to outstare its tamer. "I think you know my name, don't you, Betty? It's polite to use it, you know." At this I went out into the kitchen again, but not quickly enough to avoid hearing Betty saying, "Sorry, Mrs. Webster," and as I shut the door behind me, Mare saying, "That's more like it, isn't it, Betty?" "What's the matter with you?" Jean asked me. I stopped stage-whispering obscenities and spoke some instead, using them to point or fill out a report of the recent exchange. In a moment the sitting-room door was reopened, catching me in mid-scatologism, and Mare's voice asked my wife to come in a minute. At the ensuing conference, I was told later, Betty's willingness, industry, and general efficiency as a domestic help were probed, and a favourable account of them given. Meanwhile, I put to myself the question whether the removal of all social workers, preferably by execution squads, wouldn't do everyone a power of good. You had to do something about ill-treated, etc. children all right, but you could see to that without behaving like a sort of revivalist military policeman. The meeting next door broke up. Betty and her children were hurried out of the place, the former carrying a tattered parcel my wife had furtively thrust into her hands. I found out afterwards that among other things it contained a tweed skirt of jeans I particularly liked her in, and my own favourite socks. This was charity run riot. At lunch, Mare said efficiently, "The trouble with girls like that is that they've got no moral fibre." "How do you mean?" I asked. "I mean this, John. They've no will of their own, you see. They just drift. Line of least resistance all the time. Now, Betty didn't really want to abandon those twins of hers. She was quite a good mother to them, apparently, when she was living with her parents and going out to work at this cafe. Then she went to a dance and met this dirty swine of a crane driver, and he persuaded her to go and live with him. He's got a wife and child himself, a real beauty he is, and he wouldn't take the twins, so she just went off and left them, and let her parents look after them. Then the swine went off with another woman, and Betty's father wouldn't have her back in the house. Said he'd forgiven her once when she had the twins, when she was 16, and he wasn't going to forgive her again. He's strong chapel, you see. Believes in sinners being cast into the outer darkness. You know the kind of thing? It's a tragic story, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, and went on to talk about the conflict between generations, I think it was. Mare's technique, when others ventured beyond a couple of sentences, was to start nodding, stepping up the tempo as long as they continued. When her face was practically juddering with nods, I gave in. "Well," she went on, in a satisfied tone, "going back to where I was just now. Betty's father got into such a rage with her that he threw the twins out as well, and she got her job back at the cafe, which wasn't really a good thing because it's not a very desirable place, but at least it meant that there was some money coming in. But she couldn't take the twins to work with her, so she parked them with the woman she was renting her room from. Then she, the woman, went out for the evening one time, when she was working late, Betty, I mean, and the twins were left unattended, and they ran out into the street and wandered about, and a policeman found them, and that's how we got brought into it. They were in a dreadful state, poor little dabs, half in rags and quite filthy. I had the devil's own job stopping them being taken into care, I can tell you. You see, while Betty was with her parents in a decent home, she looked after them all right, but on her own, with bad examples all round her, she just let things slide. No moral fibre there, I'm afraid. Well, I fixed her up at the day nursery. Didn't know there were such things, she said, but I told her she'd just been too lazy to inquire. And after that things jogged along until this Norwegian came into the cafe for a cup of tea and saw Betty, and Bob's your Uncle Charlie." "Hasn't the Norwegian got to go back to Norway ever?" Jean asked, her eyes on the forkful of fish that had been oscillating for some minutes between Mare's plate and her mouth. "He's going over for a few weeks soon, he says. He's got a job at a chandler's in Ogmore Street. It's run by Norwegians, like a lot of them. Decent people. They've been married 6 weeks now, him and Betty, and he's very fond of the twins and keeps her up to the mark about them, and of course I give her a good pep talk every so often." "Of course," I said. "One job I had to do was take her out of that cafe. A lot of undesirables hang around the place, you know. A girl like Betty, quite pretty and none too bright, she'd have been just their meat. It's something to have kept her out of their clutches. Oh yes, I'm quite proud of myself in a way." One Sunday afternoon, a couple of months later, I was dozing in front of the fire. Jean had taken the kids out for a walk with a pal of hers and the pal's kids, when the doorbell rang. Wondering if the caller might at last be some beautiful borrower come to avow her love, I hurried downstairs. The person on the doorstep was certainly a woman, and probably on the right side of 30, but she wasn't beautiful. Nor, I'd have taken any odds, was she a borrower, not with that transparent MAC, that vehement eyeshadow, that squall of scent. "Good afternoon," I said. The woman smiled, fluttering her Prussian blue eyelids. "You remember me, don't you, Mr. Lewis? Betty Arnulfson?" I felt my own eyes dilate. "Why, of course," I said, genially. "How are you, Betty? Do come in." "Oh, all right, thank you. Thanks." "Haven't seen you for a long time." Not for several weeks, in fact. She turned up 3 more times to do our chores, and then that had suddenly been that. Application to Mayor Webster had produced an evasive answer, an extreme, and, as I now saw it, suspicious rarity. "I was just passing by, see, so I thought I'd drop in and see how you was all getting along like." "Good. It's very nice to see you again. Well, what have you been doing with yourself?" It could have been more delicately put, for somebody, whether herself or not, had plainly been doing a good deal with Betty one way and another. As we stood confronted by the sitting-room fire, I saw that her hair, which had been of squaw-like sleekness, now looked like some kind of petrified black froth, and that her face was puffy underneath the yellowish coating of makeup. At the same time, she'd altogether lost her hounded look. She seemed sure of herself, even full of fun. She wore a tight lilac costume with purple stripes on it, and carried a long-handled umbrella that had elaborate designs on the plastic. "Oh, I've been doing lots of things," she said in answer to my question. "Having a bit of a good time for a change. Soon got brassed off with that old cow Webster telling me what I must do and what I mustn't do. I've been keeping out of her way, going to live my own life for a change, see? I got a bit of money now. Here, have a fag." "No thanks, I don't smoke." "Go on, it'll do you good, man." "No, honestly, I never do." "I can tell you're one of the careful ones." She laughed quite a bit at this stroke, giving me a chance to notice the purplish inner portions of her lips where the lipstick had worn away or not reached. With a kind of indulgent contempt she went on, "And how you been keeping? Still working down that old library?" "Oh, yes. I feel I ought to give them a hand occasionally." "Don't you get brassed off with it now and then?" "Yes, I do, but I keep going. Can't afford to weaken." "That's the boy. Got to keep the dough coming in, haven't you?" "Well, it helps, you know." "What you pulling in down there?" "Never mind, don't suppose you want to say. What you get up to after work?" "Nothing out of the ordinary." "What do you do then when you goes out for a night? Where do you go?" "Oh, just here and there. I sometimes have a few along at the corner, at the General Picton." "I expect you got your own mates." Her cigarette had gone out, and she relit it. She wasn't really at home with it. Smoking was something she was still in the process of taking up. After spitting out a shred of tobacco, she said, "Never go round the pubs in Ogmore Street, do you?" "Not as a rule, no." Ogmore Street leads into the docks, and on these and associated grounds is usually steered well clear of during the hours of darkness by persons of refinement and discrimination. "We gets up to some games down Ogmore Street. We haves the time of our bloody lives, we do." "I bet you do." "Yeah," she said with great conviction. "Jean gone out, have she?" "Just taken the kids for a breath of fresh air. I don't suppose she'll be long." "Ah, they all right, the kids?" "Pretty fair. What are you up to yourself these days?" She gave a great yell of laughter. "That's a question, that is. What don't I bloody get up to? What am I up to, eh? That's a good one." Then her manner grew seriously informative. "I got in with the business girls now, see?" "Oh, really?" A momentary vision of Betty drinking morning coffee at the Cardoma with a group of secretaries and shorthand typists was briefly presented to me before being penetrated by her true meaning. Good fun?" "It's all right, you know. Got its points, like. See what I got here?" She opened her handbag, a shiny plastic affair in a pink pastel shade, and after I'd sat there wondering for a moment or two, drew out a roll of crumpled pound notes bound with an elastic band. "Take you a long time to pull in this much down the library, wouldn't it?" "Oh, no doubt about that." "We goes with the boys round the docks and the sailors when they comes off the ships. They're the best. They wants a bit of fun, and they don't care what they pays for it. They got plenty of dough, see? They goes on the bloody binge down there. Lots of norgies we gets. I like the norgies." "Oh, yes, your husband's one, isn't he?" This second deviation from the path of true tact was as little heeded as the first. "That's right. He've gone back to Norway now." "For good?" "No, don't think so. Father in trouble or something. Reckon he'll fetch up again some time." "How are the twins?" The domestic note, once struck, might be a handy one to prolong. What was the time? Where was Jean? Would she bring her red-faced English, "Oh, I say, darling," pal back with her? Why not? "They're okay. I got someone looking after them okay. These Norges are dead funny, though. Makes me die. The Welsh boys now, they likes me with my vest on. Don't want it no other way, but the Norges don't care for that. They wants everything off, and they don't like it outside. They always goes home with you for it. They likes to take their time like. You know Joe Lyshon?" "I've heard of him. Used to be in the fight game, didn't he?" "He runs a lot of the girls down Ogmore Street, but I won't let him run me. He wants to run me, but I don't like him. Some of his mates is dead funny, though. We broke into a shop the other night over Quinaran way. Didn't get anything much, few fags and things, but we had a laugh. Mad buggers they are. We goes down the Albany mostly. You know the Albany? It's all right. You ought to come down there one night and have a couple of drinks and a bit of fun. What about it? I'm going down there tonight." "Well, I don't want to come barging in." "Go on, I'd show you around. You wouldn't come to no harm, I promise you. They're all right there, really. I'd see you had a good time. You could tell Jean you was out with your mates, see?" "It's very kind of you, Betty, but honestly I don't think I could. I'm pretty well fixed up here. You know what I mean, and so I don't—" "I tell you one thing, John." "What's that?" "You're afraid to go with me." So many factors amalgamated to put this beyond serious dispute that reply was difficult. "Oh, I wouldn't say that," I said, after a moment, trying to ram jocoseness into tone and manner. "No, I wouldn't say that at all." Betty evidently saw through this. She said, "You are. You're afraid." "It isn't that exactly. It's just that I try to stick to my wife as far as possible," I told her, certain that I sounded like some ferret-faced Christian Lance corporal in a barrack-room discussion. "Yeah, I know. You'd fold up if you hadn't got her to cling on to. You hangs around all the bloody time." Contempt had returned to her voice, edged this time with bitterness, but she showed none of either when she went on to add, "You're a good boy." "I wouldn't say... I don't know. Betty, you mustn't mind me saying this, but isn't it rather risky to go round breaking into places with these pals of yours? Aren't you afraid of getting caught?" "Oh, short life and a merry one's what I say. It's worth it for a bit of excitement. Don't get much chance of a thrill these days, eh?" "Well, it's up to you, but you don't want to get, sent down, do you? The twins wouldn't have—" "Don't preach now. I gets brassed off with bloody preaching." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound like that." "Okay," she smiled. In the succeeding silence, a door boomed shut below. The slapping gait of my daughter Era became audible, overlaid, and in part obscured, by the characteristic bellowing squeal of her younger brother. Both sounds began to ascend the stairs. "Jean back, eh?" Betty got to her feet. "I better be going." "Oh, don't go. Stay and have a cup of tea with us." "I better not." Era ran into the room, stopping short when she saw Betty, and then moving towards the fire by a circuitous route, hugging the wall and the couch. "Put my coat off," she said to me distantly. "Hello," Betty said, with an elaborate rising inflection. "Hello? And whose little girl are you? Let Auntie take your coat off, then. Come on, Flower, that's right. Had a lovely run, have you? Did you see any bunnies? How you've grown, and you're bold as ever, I declare. Yes, you are. You're bold, very, very bold. Yes, you are. You're very, very brazen by there." Jean came in with the baby. "Well, hello, Betty," she said, grinning. "Nice to see you. Christ, shut up, can't you?" This last was addressed to the baby, who seemed almost, but not quite, worn out with mortal pain. "Sorry I couldn't come along that Tuesday like we said, Mrs. Lewis, but the twins was poorly and I couldn't fix it to let you know." "That's all right, Betty. I'll put the kettle on." "Let me take the baby for you." "Oh, thanks a lot. John, you might have kept the fire up." "Sorry, dear." I picked up the coal scuttle, which was one of the obliquely truncated cone type. It proved to weigh less than it should, less than a coal scuttle with any coal in it could. I could hardly remember ever having made up the fire without encountering, at the very outset, a light coal scuttle. During a long, foul-mouthed ardour in the coal cupboard under the stairs, I thought first how funny it was that a fallen woman, really fallen now, right smack over full length, should talk to a child in just the same style as the perpendicularly upright went in for. But then, presumably there were parts of the fallen that were bound to remain unfallen, quite important parts too. This brought up the whole mystery of prostituted existence. Not what happened to your womanhood, or your springs of emotion, or your chances of getting clued up on the splendours and miseries of flesh, screw all that, but what it was like to be a prostitute during the times when you weren't actually behaving like one, when you were in mufti on a bus, cooking the baked beans, doing the ironing, going shopping, chatting to a neighbour, buying the Christmas presents. It must be like going round ordinarily, and all the time you were a spy or a parson or a leading authority on Rilke, things which you surely often forgot about being. Anyway, to judge by the representative upstairs, being a prostitute was something you could be done a power of good by, and without having to be horrible first either. As regards not having to get horrible later on, that too could no doubt be arranged, especially if you could keep out of the way of the various sets of men in white coats who, according to report, tended to close in on you after a few years in the game. That was a nasty prospect, all right, and resembled many a kindred nastiness thought up by the Godhead in seeming a disproportionate penalty for rather obscure offences. Still, that minor cavil about the grand design had been answered long ago, hadn't it? Yes, more answers than one had been offered. A little coal, too little to be worth expelling, had entered my shoe. I bore the scuttle upstairs to find Jean and Era in the kitchen, and Betty still holding the baby. Her demeanour had quietened, and she was more like the Betty I had first met, when she said, "You won't tell Jean or what I've been saying, will you?" "Of course I won't." "And you won't tell that old Webster I've been up?" "Christ, no. What do you think I am?" "She's a cow." "Oh, she's a cow, all right." Betty nodded slowly, frowning, half-heartedly jogging the baby on her knee. Then she said, "She's a real cow." This refinement upon the original concept made me laugh. Betty joined in. We laughed together for some time, so that Era came in from the kitchen to see what the joke was. "I don't mind telling you I was very depressed about that girl at one time," Mayor Webster said. "Quite frankly, I thought we might be going to lose her. It upset me a good deal one way and another. Once her husband was out of the way for a couple of months, as soon as his back was turned, she just took the line of least resistance. Her old cronies at the cafe, you see, she took up with them again, and got things fixed up with another of them there, with minding each other's children, while the other one was off after the men. Turn and turn about, and sharing the same flat, or couple of rooms rather, the most sordid den you could possibly imagine. I'm not exaggerating, I promise you. Well, I soon got Betty and the twins out of that hellhole, and fixed them up in a decent place. Good enough for the time being, anyway, until Arnulfsson got back from Norway. They've quite a nice little flat now. Well, you'll be able to judge, John. It's nothing very grand, of course, but it's a darn sight better than what people like that are used to. Oh, thank you, Jean, dear." "Everything looks pretty bright, then, doesn't it?" my wife asked, pouring coffee. "Troubles seem to be over." Her manner showed a relief that I guessed to be partly personal. The strain of not telling Mare about Betty's earlier visit hadn't been lightly borne. "I don't think I should say that exactly," Mare said. "Arnulfsson's forgiven her all right, and she's trying to make a go of it, quite seriously, I can tell. But they keep being bothered by the crowd she used to be in with before, girls who used to be in the same gang looking her up, and once they even had a Lascar trying to force his way in. Wanted to renew old acquaintance, and got her address from the cafe, I suppose. There've been one or two things like that, and then some of the neighbours have got to hear about Betty's past, and they keep teasing her about it. Call out in the street after her. Chapel spirit gone sour, you see. It makes Arnulfsson pretty wild."
While Jean expressed her indignation, I was wondering fairly hard how I was going to be able to judge the Arnulfsons' flat. Was I in some way committed to a tea party there, or what? An answer couldn't be long delayed, for Mare was draining her cup and rising. "Come along," she said to me. "We've not got too much time." "Time for what, Mare? I'm sorry." She threw me a momentary leonine glare before dipping to pick up her handbag. When she spoke, it was with an incredulity which those accustomed to plan for others must often be subject. Since what she had lined up for me was necessitated both by logic and by natural law, how could I conceivably not know what it was? "But surely you're coming along to Betty's with me?" "I'm only popping in to see how she is. Then I can drop you at the library by 2:15. Cheerio, Jean dear. Thank you for a lovely lunch. We must fix up a coffee date for next week. I'll give John a ring, if I can manage to pick a time when he's at the seat of custom." Wiggling her eyebrows at me to enjoin silence, Jean went into a vivacious speech, which lasted more or less until I was sitting in Mare's car next to its owner. Opened envelopes, typed lists, printed forms lay about us, as at some perfunctory demonstration of bureaucracy at work. Jean continued her facial ballet until we left. I knew Mare was going to tell me some more, or possibly run over a few familiar but essential points about what being a social worker was like. She enjoyed getting me on my own and doing this because it appeared I was a man, and as such easy to talk to. Sometimes her husband came into these conversations, but not often, and when he did, it was likely to be as a feature of her exposition of what being married to a social worker's husband was like. I hoped we were going to get the practical today. Some of Mare's case histories were of great anthropological interest, and those that weren't were still a lot better than the theoretical. We got the theoretical, but crossed with the autobiographical, which helped a bit. What had first attracted her to the idea of social work? There were many answers to this conundrum, every one of them demanding careful, or at any rate lengthy consideration. Mare had taken a course in psychology, so she knew all about the power impulse and its tendency to be present in those who made a living out of good works. Several of her colleagues were prone to this affliction, and she had even detected it in herself before now. That was where psychological training was so useful. You knew how to examine your own motives and to guard against unworthy ones. With that out of the way, she felt safe in asserting that it was the duty of the mature and responsible elements of the community to do what they could for their less gifted fellows. At one time, the more conscientious kind of squire had stood in a similar relation to his tenants, the right-minded employer to his workmen and their families, but the rise of the oligopoly, Mare kept up with Labour Party research pamphlets, had put paid to all that. One of the many all-important tasks of our society was the training of specialists for functions which at one time had been discharged as byproducts of other functions. A case very much in point here was provided by the constantly expanding duties of, Mare recognized the term social workers, but for her own part she preferred, having once attended a social science summer school in Cardiff, to think of herself and her associates as technicians in paternalism. When she brought that one out, I had the infrequent experience of seeing her face express only a limited satisfaction with what she'd said. We penetrated farther into an uncongenial district. Then Mare added, "Actually, John, I'm not altogether happy about that label." "You're not?" "No, I'm not. It's a scientific term, of course, and so it's quite accurate in a way, but like all scientific terms, it's incomplete. It doesn't really say enough, doesn't go far enough, leaves out a lot. It leaves out the thing that keeps us all going, sees us over the rough patches and stops us losing faith, which is the one thing we can't afford to do in our job. It's, I can't think of any better name for it than idealism. You can laugh if you like." She turned her profile far enough round to assure me that any such laughter had better remain internal. "But that's what it is, just a simple, old-fashioned urge to do good, not in a chapel way, naturally, but scientifically, because we know what we're doing. But that's the basis of the whole thing. No point in beating about the bush. I know that sort of talk makes you feel uncomfortable, but I believe in—" Before she could mention calling a spade, a mode of nomenclature she often recommended, I told her that that wasn't quite it, and went on. Before she could mention calling a spade, a mode of nomenclature she often recommended, I told her that that wasn't quite it, and went on. "This isn't aimed at you, Mayor, but I think doing good to people's rather a risky thing. You can lay up a lot of trouble for yourself as well as the people who are being done good to, and it's so hard to be sure that the good you're trying to do really is good, the best thing for that person, and the justification of the whole business is a bit... I'm in favour of taking risks. There's far too much playing safe these days. It's ruining the country, all this stick-in-the-mud attitude. I believe in taking off my coat and getting on with the job." "But, Mayor, these are risks that involve other people. You're deciding what's best for them and then doing it, just like that. You don't give them a chance to... If you'd done as much social work as I have, John, perhaps you'd have some idea of how many people there are in this world who are constitutionally incapable of knowing what's best for them. They're like children. You wouldn't let Era be the judge of what was best for her, would you? You wouldn't let her put her hand in the fire to see if it was hot, would you?" "No, of course not, but children aren't... I know you think social work something terribly complicated and difficult. Well, believe me, 90 or 95% of the time it couldn't be simpler. At least making the right decision couldn't. Getting it carried out is something else again, of course. But the actual decision's a piece of cake, because you're dealing with complete fools or complete swine, or both. You'd think the same after a month in my job, I know you would." "I hope not." "Honestly, John, if people in general thought like you, there wouldn't be any progress at all." "No, there wouldn't, would there?" At this fundamental point, Mayor steered the car to the curb and stopped it. Not, it transpired, in order to fight me, but because we'd arrived. Facing us when we got out was a meagre row of shops, a newsagent's with a lot of advertisements written on postcards, a barber-cum tobacconist, an outfitter's whose window stock alone would have outfitted 100 middle-aged ladies in wool from head to foot, and a place that had no doubt once been a shop in the full sense, but was now whitewashed to above eye level. This last establishment had to one side of it a door, recently painted a British Railways brown, and a bell which Mayor rang. Then she took me by the arm and drew me a yard or two along the pavement. I said, "What's this in aid of, then?" in what was supposed to be a bantering tone. Actually, I was only half noticing. My mind was busy trying to decide what Mayor's "you'd think the same after a month in the job" thing had reminded me of. You don't want to be in front of the front door of a house like this when they open it. Oh, that was it. The veteran colonial administrator to the just-out-from-England colonial administrator. We're all a bit pro-Wog when we first get out here, my boy. It's only natural. Soon wears off, though, you'll find. Why not? Well, the door opening makes the draft rush through the house, and the draft carries the bugs with it. You don't want them to land on you. You mean really bugs? She had my full attention now. You don't want them to land on you. Hello, Mrs. Webster. Don't often see you up this way. Oh, good afternoon, Emrys. How are you? Mayor turned animatedly towards the new arrival, a young police constable with a long, pale nose. Wife all right? Well, no, she hasn't been too grand, actually. They had her back in for 3 days' observation the week before last, and the doctor said... His voice became indistinguishable, chiefly because he was lowering its pitch, but also because he was removing its source in the direction of the shop that had committed itself so wholeheartedly to the woolen garment. Mayor retreated with him, nodding a fair amount. I was still feeling impressed by her bit of know-how about the bugs. Real front-line stuff, that. Yes, who's here, please? This came from the now open front door, at which a small red-haired, red-faced man was standing. My name's Lewis. I don't know you. What do you want here? I looked along the pavement to where Mare, nodding faster, was standing with her back to me. It must have had all the appearance of a furtive sidelong, up-to-no-good look. Like a fool, I said, I'm a friend of your wife's. As I said this, I smiled. Get out of here, the red-haired man bawled. He wore a red shirt. Get out, you bastard! Look, it's all right. There's no need to... Get out, quick, you bastard! For the first time he saw Mare and the policeman, who were now approaching. Mrs. Webster, hello! And you, officer! Take away this bastard." "Now calm down, Bent. Nothing to get excited about. Mr. Lewis is with me. He and his wife have been very kind to Betty. He's come along with me to see how you all are. He's a friend of mine." "Sorry, Mrs. Webster. Sorry, sir, very sorry." "That's all right, Bent. Mr. Lewis doesn't mind. He knows you didn't mean anything. You just forget it. Now can we come in?" "Please, yes, come in." "Bye-bye, Emrys. Give Maureen my love. Tell her I'll pop in to see her in a day or two. And don't you worry. She's a good strong girl, and with the better weather coming she'll soon pull round, I guarantee." "Thank you very much, Mrs. Webster. Goodbye now." Before he turned away, I caught a glimpse of Emrys's face, and was startled to see on it an expression of relief and gratitude, quite as if he'd just received an important reassurance of some kind. I followed Mare across the threshold, frowning and shaking my head at life's endless enigma. Bugs or no bugs, the house revealed itself to me as not too bad. There were loose and cracked floorboards, but none missing, and no damp. The kitchen we penetrated to was dark all right, but it smelt no worse than stale. Through its open door I could see a scullery with a row of clean cups hanging above the sink, and a dishcloth spread over the taps to dry. One of the twins came into view in that quarter, took in the sight of visitors, and doubled away again. "Good afternoon, Betty," Mare was saying, in her hospital rounds manner. "My goodness, you have done well, haven't you? You really ought to be congratulated. You have made the place look nice." She went on like that while I glanced round the place. It did look nice enough as far as it went, but that wasn't at all far. Most noticeably, there was an absence of the unnecessary things, the ornaments, the photographs and pictures, the postcards on the mantelpiece that every home accumulates. It was as if the moving men had just dumped the furniture down, leaving the small stuff to be unpacked later, only in this case there was nothing to unpack. Curtains perhaps fell into the category of the unnecessary, even, with a small single window like this one, of the excessive. They were of Betty's favourite lilac shade, and ranks of mauve personages, with sword and fan, periwig and towering hairdo, were doing a minuet on them. At this sight I felt pity stirring. "Get back, you brute," I said internally, giving it a mental kick on the snout. Then I felt angry with a whole lot of people, but without much prospect of working out just who. Mare was nearing her peroration. I looked covertly at Betty. Although no longer tarted up, she hadn't recovered the quiet, youthful air she'd had when I first saw her. She wore a grey cardigan which seemed designed to accentuate the roundness of her shoulders. The circles under her eyes weren't the temporary kind. She was staring up at Mare with the sarcastic patience of someone listening to a shaky alibi. Bent Arnolfsson, after standing about uneasily for a time, went out into the scullery, and I heard water plunging into a kettle. Still talking, the old moral commando moved to follow him. "I just want to have a word with Bent a minute," she said, and shut the door behind her. "Well, how are things?" I asked. Betty glanced at me without friendliness, then away. "Okay," she muttered, picking at a hole in the cover of her chair. "Your husband seems a nice chap." "What do you know about it, eh?" "I'm only going on how he struck me." "Oh, he's okay, I suppose. He's a good boy." "There's a lot to be said for good boys." "Suppose so." "You seem to have settled down here nicely." "Yeah." "Jean and the children asked to be remembered to you, by the way." To shrug both her shoulders would have meant heaving herself up from the chair back, so she made do with just shrugging the uppermost one. It was clear to me that there was nothing left of the cordiality of our last meeting, and no wonder. A man who had seen her when she was free was the last kind of person on earth who should have been allowed to see her now she was tamed. And in any contact not made on terms of equality, the speech of one party or the other will fall almost inevitably into the accents and idioms of patronage, as I just heard my own speech doing. Severity is actually more respectful, but that wouldn't do here. Would anything? I said, "Do you ever miss the old life?" "What do you want to know for? What's it got to do with you?" "Nothing. I was only asking." "Well, don't ask, see? Mind your own bloody business, see? What do you want to come here for, anyway?" I'm sorry, Betty, I just came to see how you were getting on.
Like old Webster, eh? Well, I don't like people coming along to see how I'm getting on, see? I gets brassed off with it, see?"
As she got up from her chair to make her point more forcibly, the scullery door opened, and Mare came back into the room. My sense of relief filled me with shame. Triumph swept over Betty's face at being about to do what she must have wanted to do for quite a time.
"Your husband certainly thinks the world of you, Betty," Mare led off. "He's been telling me." "Get out, you old cow!" Betty shouted, blinking fast. "I doesn't want you here, see? I got enough to put up with the bloody neighbours hanging over the fence and staring in the bloody windows, and them buggers upstairs complaining. I got enough without you poking your bloody nose in, see? Just you piss off quick and leave me alone."
"Please, my dear, be quiet." Bent Arnulfson had reappeared in the scullery doorway. In one hand he held a brown enamel teapot, in the other the hand of one of the twins. "Mrs. Webster is kind, and this gentleman." "You keep out of this, man. Go on, Webster. What you waiting for? I said get out, didn't I? Who do you think you are? That's what I'd like to know, poking your bloody nose in everywhere and telling every bugger what to do. You're beyond, you are, Webster. Bloody beyond. And as far as you—" At the moment when Betty, who was now crying, turned to me, Mare looked at her wristwatch with a quick movement. "Who asked you to come snooping in? That's what I'd like to know," Betty started to say to me, but Mare cut in. "I'm afraid we shan't be able to manage that cup of tea, Bent," she said, interestedly. "I'd no idea the time was getting along like this. I must take Mr. Lewis off to his place of work, or I shall get into trouble. I'll be in next week, as usual, and I'm sure things will have settled down by then. Goodbye, Betty. Don't upset yourself, there's a good girl. Goodbye, Bent." With another look at me, full of accusation, Betty blundered out into the scullery and banged the door. Later, I thought how cruel it was that she'd been met by bland preoccupation instead of the distress or anger she'd longed to provoke, that her brave show of defiance must have seemed to her to have misfired. But at the time I only wanted to get out before she came back. Brushing aside Bent Arnulfson's halting apologies, Mare led me away. "Astonishing how predictable these girls are," she said as we drove off. "I'd seen that little lot coming for some time. You usually get it sooner or later, and afterwards you often find you get on better than you did before. Sort of clears the air in a way. Next week she'll be falling over herself and holding on to my hand and going on about, 'Oh, Mrs. Webster, how could I have said what I did? What a pig I was to you, Mrs. Webster, and you so kind,' and not being able to do enough for me. Not that that phase lasts very long either. No, there's no doubt about it. If you look for thanks in this job, you're wasting your time and letting yourself in for a big disappointment. The approval of your conscience is all the reward you ever get." "Seen this?" my wife asked me later in the same year. I took the local paper from her and read that Elizabeth Grace Arnulfson, 19, had been sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment for helping to burgle a cafe in Harriston. The 2 men who'd been with her got longer sentences. Mrs. Mare Webster, it was further reported, had spoken of her belief that Elizabeth Arnulfson was weak-willed rather than vicious and had been led astray by undesirable companions. She said this out of her thorough knowledge of the girl's character and had been thanked for saying it. "Well, I hope Mare's satisfied," I said, throwing the paper down. "Don't be silly. You know she'll be very cut up. She's always done her best for Betty." "Her worst, you mean?" "Don't talk so soft. Betty only burgled that place to get her own back." "What, on Mare?" "Yes. I should say it was chiefly on Mare. Not on society or any of that crap, as a method of not being the kind of person Mare wanted her to be." Sounds more like just high spirits to me. And according to what you told me, Betty had been breaking into places quite a time back. Not until Mare had started licking her into shape. "You're exaggerating the whole thing, John. What should have happened according to you anyway? Betty going on being a tart?" "Why not?" "What about the twins and this Bent bloke?" "Yes. No, she shouldn't have gone on being a tart. Or couldn't, or something. Pity in a way, though. She was enjoying herself." "You don't know anything about it. I'm going to make supper." I know how not to deal with people like Betty. Shall I give you a hand?" "No, you make the cocoa after. How do you stop people being tarts? How would you do it, if it was you?" Always assuming I thought I ought to try. It's all a mess. It all needs going into. "Who's going to go into it? You and Mare?" "No, just me. What about that supper?" I could picture Mare doing what she'd have called helping Betty through the ordeal, going to see her in prison, meeting her when she got out, and at once settling down again to the by now surely hopeless task of inducing her to lead a normal life with her husband and children. And what would friend Lewis be up to while all this was going on? Getting boozed with his mates, having fantasies about some new beautiful borrower, binding about his extra evening duties in the summer, and explaining to his wife that you couldn't have good social workers because the only kind of chap who'd make a good one was also the kind of chap who'd refuse to be one. Of the two of us, it had to be admitted that on the face of it, Mare had a claim to be considered the less disreputable character, up there in the firing line while cowards flinched and traitors sneered. Once you got off the face of it, though, and got on to what Mare was actually doing up there in the firing line, the picture changed a bit, just as things like the Labour Party looked better from some way away than close to. This was a timely reflection, because I'd been almost starting to admire Mare rather, and admiring someone you think is horrible is horrible. It was true enough that you had to have social workers, in the same way that you had to have prison warders, local government officials, policemen, military policemen, nurses, parsons, scientists, mental hospital attendants, politicians, and, for the time being anyway, God forgive us all, hangmen. That didn't mean that you had to feel friendly disposed towards any such person, bar the odd nurse perhaps, and then only on what you might call extrinsic grounds. Actually, of course, it wasn't Mare I ought to have been cogitating about. Mare, with her creed of take off your coat and get on with it, and never mind what it was, could be run out of town at any stage, if possible, after being bound and gagged and forced to listen to a no-holds-barred denunciation of her by Betty. What, if anything, should or could be done about Betty? And who, if anyone, should or could do it, and how? That was the real stuff. I was sorry to think how impossible it was for me to turn up at the jail on the big day, holding a bunch of flowers and a new plastic umbrella. Interesting things. Gloria Davis crossed the road towards the Odeon on legs that weaved a little, as if she was tipsy or rickety. She wasn't either, really. It was just the high-heeled shoes worn for the first time, specially for today. The new hoop earrings swayed from her lobes, hitting her rhythmically on the jaws as she walked. No, they were wrong. They had looked fine in her bedroom mirror, but they were wrong somehow. She whipped them off and stuffed them into her handbag. Perhaps there'd be a chance to try them again later, when it was the evening. They might easily make all the difference then. She stopped thinking about the earrings when she found she couldn't see Mr. Hughes Evans anywhere in the crowd of people waiting for their friends on the steps of the Odeon. She knew at once, then, that he hadn't really meant it. After all, what could an inspector of taxes, assessment section, see in an 18-year-old comptometer operator? How stuck-up she'd been, congratulating herself on being the first girl in the office Mr. Hughes Evans had ever asked out. Just then, a tall man who had been standing close by took off his beige mackintosh hat with a drill-like movement, keeping his elbow close to his chest. It was Mr. Hughes Evans. "Hello, Gloria," he said. He watched her for a bit, a smile showing round the curly stem of the pipe he was biting. Then he added, "Didn't you recognize me, Gloria?" "Sorry, Mr. Hughes Evans. I sort of just didn't see you." The hat and the pipe had put her off completely, and she was further confused by being called Gloria twice already. He nodded, accepting her apology and explanation. He put his hat on again with a ducking gesture, then removed his pipe. "Shall we go in? Don't want to miss the news." While Mr. Hughes Evans bought 2 2-and-4-pennies, Gloria noticed he was carrying a string bag full of packets of potato crisps. She wondered why he was doing that. It was very dark inside the cinema itself, and Mr. Hughes Evans had to click his fingers for a long time and tremendously loudly before an usherette came. The Odeon was often full on a Saturday when the football team was playing away, and Gloria and Mr. Hughes Evans couldn't help pushing past a lot of people to get to their seats. A good deal of loud sighing, crackling of sweet packets, and uncoiling of embraces marked their progress. At last they were settled in full view of the screen on which the Duke of Edinburgh was playing polo. Mr. Hughes Evans asked Gloria loudly whether she could see all right, and when she whispered that she could, he offered her a chocolate. "They're rather good," he said. Almost nothing happened while the films were shown. The main feature was on first. As soon as Gloria could tell that it was old-fashioned, she was afraid she wouldn't enjoy it. Nobody did anything in it, they just talked. Some of the talking made Mr. Hughes Evans laugh for a long time at a time, and once or twice he nudged Gloria. When he did this, she laughed too, because it was up to her to be polite and not spoil his pleasure. The film ended with a lot of fuss about a Gladstone bag and people falling into each other's arms in a daft, put-on way. Gloria kept wondering if Mr. Hughes Evans was going to put his arm round her. She'd never yet gone to the pictures in male company without at least this happening, and usually quite a lot more being tried on, but somehow Mr. Hughes Evans didn't seem the man for any of that. He was older than her usual escorts to start with, and to go on with, there was something about that Mackintosh hat and that string bag which made it hard to think of him putting his arm round anyone, except perhaps his mother. Once she caught sight of his hand dangling over the arm of the seat towards her, and she moved her own hand carefully so that he could take hold of it easily if he wanted to, but he didn't. He leaned rather closer to her to light her cigarettes than he strictly needed to, and that was all. After a pair of tin gates had been shown opening in a slow and dignified way, there was about half an hour of advertisements while everybody whistled the tunes that were playing. The cereals and the detergents came up, then a fairly long and thorough episode about razor blades. During it, Mr. Hughes Evans suddenly said, "It's a damned scandal, that business." "What's that, then?" "Well, all this business about the modern shave. All these damned gadgets and things. It's just a way of trying to get you to use a new blade every day, that's all." "Oh, I get you. You mean because the—" "Mind you, with the kind of blade some of these firms turn out, you've got to use a new blade. I grant them that." He laughed briefly. "If you don't want to skin yourself getting the beard off, that is. And of course, they don't give a damn how much they spend on publicity. It's all off tax. Doesn't really cost them a bean." Gloria was going to say, "How is that, then?" But Mr. Hughes Evans's manner, that of one with a comprehensive explanation on instant call, warned her not to. She said instead, "No, of course it doesn't." He looked at her with mingled scepticism and wistfulness, and ended the conversation by saying violently, "Some of these firms." While the lights went down again, Gloria thought about this brief exchange. It was just the kind of talk older men went in for, the sort of thing her father discussed with his butties when they called to take him down to the pub. Things to do with the government and pensions and jobs and the Russians, things that fellows who went dancing never mentioned. She saw, on the other hand, that that kind of talk wasn't only tied up in some way with getting old, it also had to do with having money and a car, with speaking properly and with being important. So a girl would show herself up for a lump with no conversation and bad manners if she gave away to an older man the fact that uninteresting things didn't interest her. Next time Mr. Hughes Evans got onto them, she must do better. The second film promised to be full of interesting things. There were some lovely dresses. The star looked just like another star Gloria had often wished she looked like, and there was a scene in a kind of flash nightclub with dim lights, men in tailcoats, and a modern band. The star was wearing a terrific evening dress with sequins and had a white fur round her shoulders. A man with a smashing profile sitting at the bar turned and saw her. Her eyes met his for a long moment. Gloria swallowed and leant forward in her seat. Mr. Hughes Evans nudged Gloria and said, "Don't think much of this, do you?" What about some tea?"
"Oh, we haven't got to go yet, have we?"
"Well, we don't want to sit all through this, do we?" Gloria recollected herself.
"No. Right you are, then."
They moved effortfully back along the row, taking longer this time because some of the embraces were slower in uncoiling. In the foyer, Gloria said,
"Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hughes Evans. I enjoyed the film ever so much."
But he wasn't listening. He was looking wildly about, as if he'd just found himself in a lady's cloakroom, and beginning to say,
"The crisps! I've left them inside." "Never mind, don't you worry, it won't take a minute fetching them. I don't mind waiting at all."
He stared out at her from under the mackintosh hat, which he'd pulled down for some reason so that it hid his eyebrows.
"I shan't be able to remember the seat. You come too, Gloria. Please?"
After a lot more finger-clicking inside, they found the row. In the beam of the usherette's torch, Gloria saw that their seats were already occupied. Even more slowly than before, Mr. Hughes Evans began shuffling sidelong away from her. There was some disturbance. Gloria, waiting in the aisle, turned and looked at the screen. The man with the profile was dancing with the star now, and all the other people had gone back to their tables and were watching them. Gloria watched them too, and had forgotten where she was, when a moderate uproar slowly broke out and slowly moved towards her. It was Mr. Hughes Evans with the crisps, which were rustling and crunching like mad. Men's voices were denouncing him, some of them loudly, and one of the loud ones using words Gloria didn't like. In fact, one word was the word she'd called that word. Her cheeks went hot. Mr. Hughes Evans was saying things like, "Very sorry, old boy," and "Hurts me as much as it hurts you." And every so often he laughed cheerily. Everywhere people were calling, "Shh." Gloria couldn't think of anything to do to help. A long time later, they were outside again. It was clear at once that the rain had stopped holding off hours ago. Mr. Hughes Evans took her arm and said they'd better run for it, and that was what they did. They ran a long way for it, and fast too, so that the high heels were doing some terrible slipping and skidding. Opposite Woolworth's, Gloria nearly did the splits, but Mr. Hughes Evans prevented that, and was just as effective when she started a kind of sliding football tackle towards a lady in bifocal glasses carrying a little boy. That was just outside Bevan and Bevan's, and Gloria didn't mind it much because she'd guessed by now that they were going to Delicio's, a fairly flash Italian restaurant frequented by the car-owning classes, unless, of course, they were making for Quimbulla or Portadulus on foot. There was a queue in Delicio's, and Gloria panted out the news that she was going to the cloakroom, where there was another but shorter queue. While she waited her turn, she felt her hair, which must have been looking dreadful, and wondered about her face, to which she'd applied some of the new liquid make-up everyone was talking about. She was glad to find, in due time, that she hadn't been looking too bad. Touching up with the liquid stuff didn't quite provide the amazing matte finish the advertisements described. In fact, she wondered if she didn't look a bit like one of the waxworks she'd seen that time in Cardiff. But there was no time to redo it, and it must surely wear off a little after a bit. She gazed longingly at the earrings in her bag and at the new mascara kit, but these must certainly wait. Taking a last peep at herself, she reflected gratefully, as her father had often exhorted her to do, that she was very lucky to be quite pretty and have all that naturally curly, naturally blonde hair. Mr. Hughes Evans had a table for two when she joined him. He took the bag of crisps off her chair and laid them reverently at his side. Gloria thought he seemed very attached to them. What did he want them for? And so many of them, too. It was a puzzle. Perhaps he guessed her curiosity because he said, "They're for the party. They said I was to get them." "Oh, I see. Who'll be there at the party? You did tell me when you asked me, but I'm afraid I've forgotten." "Not many people you'll know, I'm afraid. There'll be Mr. Pugh, of course, from Allowances, and his wife, and Miss Harry from Repayments, and my brother. You've met him, haven't you? And my dentist and his,
and his friend, and 2 or 3 of my brother's friends. About a dozen altogether.